Okay, welcome everybody to Satsang. Really excited to have everybody. July 16th, 2026, man, the time it just keeps going, doesn't it? So today we're gonna deal with a couple of things, but the one thing that um, I wanted everybody to notice as a main thing is that from a mind standpoint, we all rush to try to make things solid and final, and that actually the world we live in is never that way. So when we talk about acceptance, that's actually the detail that we're talking about. Because when you ask everybody about acceptance, everybody nods their head as though, well, that's the easiest thing to understand. Just accept what is, right? And of course, when you do that, as the final verdict is, I'm accepting in a certain way, you're trying to solidify something that can't be solidified. So the acceptance is actually the holding of a world that's never finalized. That's actually it. So that's the theme for today, and we'll walk our way through. So we're going to work with chapter three out of I Am That. It's called The Living Present, and that has one of the most famous pieces in here. You'll love it. So the questioner basically says, "Hey, as I can see, there's nothing wrong with my body, nor my real being. Both are not of my making and need not be improved on. What has gone wrong is the inner body, call it mind, consciousness, whatever the name." And Maharaj then says, he says, well, what would you consider to be wrong with your mind? Right? And notice such it. That's the question you look for, is the what's wrong question. That's one. I'm glad we did this one today. It is restless, greedy of the present, and afraid of the unpleasant. Maharaj, what's wrong with it seeking the pleasant and shirking the unpleasant? Here's the famous quote: between the banks of pain and pleasure, the river of life flows. It is only when the mind refuses to flow with life and gets stuck at the banks that it becomes a problem. By flowing with life, I mean acceptance, letting come what comes and go what goes. Desire not, fear not, observe the actual as and when it happens, for you are not what happens, you are to whom it happens. Ultimately, even the observer, you are not. You are the ultimate potentiality of which the all-embracing consciousness is the manifestation. So notice that the first thing he says is, when you're watching, the first thing you see is that what's happening is coming to the watching. Right? Ultimately, that's all awareness is the coming to within duality. Questioner says, yet between the body and the self, there lies a cloud of thoughts and feelings which neither serve the body nor the self. These thoughts and feelings are flimsy, transient, and meaningless, mere mental dust that blinds and chokes. Yet there they are, obscuring and destroying. Surely, Maharaj, surely a memory of an event cannot pass for the event itself, nor can the anticipation. There is something unique, exceptional about the present event, whether the previous or the coming do not have, which they don't have. There is a livingness about it, an actuality. It stands out as if illuminated. There is the stamp of reality on the actual, which the past and the future do not have. What gives the present the stamp of reality? There is nothing peculiar in the present event to make it different from the past or the future. So think about that for a second. For a moment, the past was actual and the future will become so. What makes the present so different? Obviously, my presence. I am real, for I am always now in the present, and what is with me now shares my reality, in my reality. The past is in memory, the future in imagination. So you hear me often say that we don't live life, but we live the story of life. So what I'm saying is that we create a story about the past, We create a story about the future, and then we live in those particular stories. Now, we do bring them into the present, but the present now becomes occupied rather than in simply watching the arising of what is, of being basically attended. It needs to attend to the story that we think is there. So when we talk about someone living in the story and never being there for the present, that's what we're talking about. That's what he's saying here. The past is in the memory, the future in imagination. There's nothing in the present event that makes it stand out as real. It may be some simple periodical occurrence like the striking of a clock. In spite of our knowing that the successive strokes are identical, the present stroke is quite different from the previous one and the next. As remembered or expected, a thing focused in the now is with me, for I am ever present. It is my own reality that I impart to a present event. You see that? So when the story gets in the way, simply the watching, right? Watching, you can see the story, right? I'm identified with the story that I created. I think I am my body, mind, and all the things that come with it. When I watch, what happens is watching is simply an observance of the present, right? And you'll notice that the story, which used to have this amazing kind of tension and attraction to it, it begins to dissolve. Have you ever noticed that I always talk about watching feeling like there's a distance to it? Right. That distance I speak of is your home. And the reason I say that is identification. It's a glue. It's really, it makes it intense. The reason it's intense is to cover just the simple ease of being there and being present. Right. No, no drums and horns for the present. It's just there. Very simple. He says, but we deal with things remembered as if they were real. Maharaj, we consider memories only when they come into the present. The forgotten is not counted until one is reminded, which implies bringing it into the now. Ah, the questioner. Yes, I can see there is now some unknown factor that gives momentary reality to transient actuality. I love it. They use big words, don't they? I just say it's a story, and when you basically light the story up, that's what's going on. And when you watch the story, it shifts. Way easier. Um, Maharaj, you need not say it is unknown, for you see it in constant operation. Since you were born, has it ever changed? Things and thoughts have been changing all the time, but the feeling that what is now is real has never changed, even in a dream. I always use that example. You were at your fifth birthday, you were at your 10th birthday, you were at your, right? The you that was there, you can never describe. All it was is you were there, and nothing's different in you now than you were at 5. I'm 73 years old at my 5-year-old birthday. The what was present there is the same thing as what's present now. Not a thing has changed. Right? That's the what's here now. So that feeling that what is now has never changed, even in a dream. So here we go. This is one of the Pharisee questions. In deep sleep, there is no experience of the present reality, right? And then he says, which is beautiful, he says, the blankness of deep sleep is due entirely to the lack of specific memories, but a general memory of well-being is there. In other words, in deep sleep, you come out and you go, I was in deep sleep, but you know you were there. There is a difference in feeling when we say I was deeply asleep from I was absent. Questioner. He says, we'll repeat the question we began with. Between life source and life expression, which is the body, there is a mind and its ever changeful states. The stream of mental states is endless, meaningless, and painful. Pain is the constant factor. What we call pleasure is but a gap, an interval between two painful states. I guess you could always say that pain's actually in between two pleasureful states, but that's a different way to look at it. Desire and fear are the weft and warp of living, and both are made of pain. Our question is, can there be a happy mind? This is a really good one. Maharaj, Desire is the memory of pleasure and fear is the memory of pain. Both make the mind restless. Moments of pleasure are merely gaps in the stream of pain. How can the mind be happy? So think about it. The mind, the way we understand and the way the mind lives today, it's always in movement. It's never happy. That is true when we desire pleasure or expect pain, but there are moments of unexpected, unanticipated joy, pure joy, uncontaminated by desire, unsought, undeserved, God-given. Right? Maharaj, still joy is only against a background of pain. Is pain a cosmic fact or purely mental? The universe is complete, and where there is completeness, where nothing lacks, what can give pain? So now he's shifted into a different place. What he's pointing out is that the mind delivers pain because it basically operates in pieces and parts and parsing things, right? So when he says the universe is complete and where there's completeness, where nothing lacks, what can give pain? The you that you are, that presence, right? This is just a wonderful statement. The questioner says the universe may be complete as a whole, but incomplete in details. See, notice the addiction that we have to taking whatever is whole and making it a detail. We we do that all the time. I often tell the story when I was a kid, and I'd hear the story of Humpty Dumpty. And my grandpa once asked me, he says, "Well, if they put Humpty Dumpty back together, back together, like it says in the poem, right? Do you have the same Humpty Dumpty?" And I sat for a minute. I said, "No, it has cracks. Right? You put it back together, you can see the cracks." That's what the mind does. It attempts to have the whole by putting it together in details, but there's always the cracks. The mind always has the cracks in it, right? A part of the whole seen in relation to the whole is also complete. Only when seen in isolation does it become deficient and thus a seat of pain. What makes for isolation? Limitations of the mind, of course. The mind cannot see the whole for the part. Maharaj, good enough. The mind by its very nature divides and opposes. Can there be some other mind which unites, harmonizes, and sees the whole in the part, and the part is totally related to the whole? The other mind, where to look for it? That's what the questioner says. In going beyond limiting, dividing, and opposing mind, and emptying the mental process as we know it, when this comes to an end, that mind is born. So when I was talking about witnessing, that's the beginning of that birth of that mind. It's kind of funny to call it a mind. I mean, we usually just call it absolute awareness or something along that line. But the watching is the doorway to that pure awareness. The pure awareness of your fifth birthday, your 15th birthday, and your 25th birthday. Same. It's the same, right?
Never
There's
mind.
no cracks in that one. He said, so he says, in that mind, the problem of joy and sorrow exists no longer. Maharaj, not as we know them, as desirable or repugnant. It becomes rather a question of love-seeking expression and meeting with obstacles. The inclusive mind is love in action, battling against circumstances, initially frustrated and ultimately victorious. Now, don't become confused here because in describing it, he kind of takes you a little bit back in the mind because he's, love in action, battling against circumstances. That's how we would describe it as a story. Lived, it's just love just lives itself. Love just lives itself, right? The story that you tell about it looks like what Maharaj just said. He says, between the spirit and the body, is it love that provides the bridge? Maharaj, what else? Mind creates the abyss, the heart crosses it. Okay. So remember that when we talk about love in Advaita in non-duality, you get kind of confused a lot. It tends to attract folks that aren't necessarily love and heart people, but people that like clarity. And the only difference is that clarity, which is also love, is just seeing the world as myself. And if there's no one else, then there's perfect unity, if you will, or perfect wholeness, right? And that is love. The 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 seeker that carries with them incredible bhakti style energy, if you want to call it that, is going to have the felt experience of love, which is just the felt experience of exactly the same thing I described as the whole. So they're just those are just so you hear those two, they're not different, right? It's just that every body mind is built differently. It's going to it records things differently, right? So whichever leaning you have, that's the leaning you have. Don't get confused between love and clarity. Those are exactly the same things. All right. Nice to have you, by the way, Brad. All right. This is
Good to
this
see
is
you,
a fun.
buddy.
Yay. This is a fun story. One of Ramesh's favorites, by the way. There's an old Chinese story about a farmer who lived during a time when the small kingdoms were constantly at war. He owned very little, a modest field, a son, and a single horse with which they worked the land together. One morning, the horse disappeared and the neighbors hurried over. What terrible luck, they said. The farmer looked at him quietly. Maybe. The following day, the horses were returned, bringing with it 6 wild horses. The neighbors could hardly contain their excitement. What wonderful luck! Again, the farmer answered only, maybe. The next day, his son was attempted to ride one of the wild horses. He was thrown violently to the ground and broke his leg. The neighbors returned. What terrible luck! The farmer simply smiled. Maybe. The following morning, the soldiers arrived from the king's army, conscripting every able-bodied man into the military service. When they saw the son's broken leg, they left him behind. The neighbors appeared once more. What wonderful luck! The farmer looked at them exactly as he had before. Maybe. Notice what a beautiful thing a farmer who could see the world is always emergent, right? Maybe. There's no conclusion in that kind of living, right? It's a deceptively simple story, like most great teaching stories, that slips quietly beneath the intellect before the intellect realizes anything important has happened. At first glance, it appears to be about acceptance. I don't think it is. I think it's about something far more subtle. The farmer is not accepting events. He's refusing to accept the story that's still being written. So rather than accepting events and making them final, he's letting them simply be a happening. The neighbors cannot help themselves. Every event demands an immediate verdict: good, bad, fortunate, unfortunate, lucky, unlucky. The story must be completed now. The farmer understands something they do not. Life is still moving. The river is not stopped flowing. How can anyone know what today's event will become tomorrow? His maybe is not an uncertainty born of ignorance. It's wisdom born of seeing. Things are how they are, nothing more, nothing less. So notice that the conclusions that your mind runs to usually are almost always an addition to what is. Right? We got to get that in there. And there's a reason for that. Consciousness, your intuition knows, right? Your intuition knows that there's something permanent peace. And consciousness, responding to that tuition, tries to make permanent peace exist in duality, where it does and never will. And the way that it does that is it's constantly trying to make things final, right? You see that? Permanent and final. If you and I say, hey, this is how it is, permanent and final, right? That is consciousness way of trying to basically send a Trojan horse in there and give you permanent peace within a world where there is none. That's all that's going on there. Watch how difficult this is for the mind. We speak about acceptance as though it were one of the elementary teachings of Advaita. Almost everybody agrees with it immediately. Yes, of course, the nod of the head. We should accept life. The conversation moves on. Then something unexpected happens: a diagnosis, a financial setback, a disagreement, a betrayal, a success, a failure. Immediately, the nodding stops. The interpreting begins. Right? Find the final. Acceptance quietly disappears, replaced by negotiation. This shouldn't be happening. Why me? Surely this means. What if? The event itself is rarely the problem. The story about the event almost always is. Things are how they are. The story insists that they should be otherwise. So you see that? You are the story. The autonomous decision maker says, I'll make a story. I'm going to make a story up about this one, right? I made up the story. That was me. Why? Because the mind possesses a remarkable ability which serves us beautifully in practical life, while simultaneously becoming the source of much of our suffering. It tells stories. This is not a defect. With no stories, there could be no civilization, no science, no law, no history, no families, no language. Humans organize experience through narrative. In Hawaii, there's a lovely expression, talk story. Right? I've never lived in a place. I'm going to come over, man. I want to sit and talk story with you. Everybody on the street here understands that. Talk story. It perfectly captures something fundamental about human life. We don't simply exchange information, we exchange stories. We tell each other what happened, we explain ourselves, we remember, we anticipate, we recognize experience, we organize experience into narratives that make life intelligible. Story itself is not the problem. The problem begins much earlier. Every story quietly attempts something impossible. It attempts to make the temporary permanent. It is one of the most subtle movements of the divided mind. Experience is always moving. Thought changes, emotion changes, circumstances change, relationships change, bodies change, weather changes, history changes. Everything appearing in consciousness is fluid. Only intuition knows this, yet the mind feels deeply uncomfortable standing in pure movement. It longs for solid ground, something dependable, something fixed. So it performs an extraordinary act. Extraordinary act. It takes the flowing river of experience, freezes one moment into a conclusion. This is what happens. This is what that means. This is how things are. So when you talk about acceptance, accepting things how they are, it's not the mind's version of how they are. How they are isn't always happening. Notice how quickly the conclusion hardens. Yesterday's disappointment becomes my life never works out. Today's compliment becomes I've finally succeeded. A single conversation becomes she's always been like that. One event becomes a permanent identity. One moment becomes an entire future. One fragment becomes the whole story. Things are how they are. The story insists that there's something more. Ramesh Balsekar often expressed this with characteristic simplicity. He'd say this all the time, by the way. All we know is that we exist. The rest is interpretation. There's extraordinary precision hidden in these few words. I am, that is known. Everything else, interpretation. The event appears, the mind interprets it, then something almost invisible occurs. The interpretation quietly disguises itself as reality. We forget we are no longer experiencing the event itself. We are experiencing our conclusion about the event. This is what I have elsewhere called the as-if state. We live as if our interpretations were reality itself, as if our stories possess permanence, as if today's conclusion could safely be carried into tomorrow unchanged. Things are how they are. The story says they are how I understand them. There's an enormous difference. This is exactly where chapter 3 of I Am That opens a doorway. The questioner tells Maharaj that the mind is restless, always chasing pleasure, always avoiding pain. Most teachers would begin by correcting the mind. Maharaj does something entirely unexpected. What's wrong in seeking pleasure and avoiding the unpleasant? Nothing, nothing at all. Then comes one of those beautiful metaphors in the entire book. Between the banks of pain and pleasure, the river of life flows. Pause there. The river flows. It does not cling to one bank. It does not reject the other. It simply moves. Maharaj continues, it's only when the mind refuses to flow with life, it gets stuck at the banks. That becomes a problem. What a remarkable image. The river never suffers. Only the mind standing on the bank suffers. Only the mind insisting this pleasure must remain. This pain must leave. This moment should last. That moment should never have happened. The river has no such opinions. It simply flows. I don't know if you can see what the simplicity of watching now is, right? When you get rid of all the if you know it's for interpretation and you just watch it, right? All of the details, all the stuff that you niggle about every single day goes away. Not there anymore. Then Maharaj gives perhaps the clearest definition of acceptance anywhere in his teaching. By flowing with life, I mean acceptance, letting come what comes and go what goes. No resignation, no passivity, no indifference. Simply letting come what comes, letting go what goes. The farmer's maybe, rendered as Advaita. The neighbor standing on the bank issuing verdicts. The farmer remains ever in the river. Things are how they are, and for now, perhaps that is enough. The river is not trying to become a lake. It has no ambition to preserve this particular bend or cling to that particular current. Its nature is movement. Only the mind longs for permanence. This is why Maharaj turns the conversation in a direction that initially seems unrelated. He asks a question so ordinary, it's easy to miss its depth. What gives the present moment its unmistakable sense of reality? Think about that. What does what is happening now feel so much more real than what happened yesterday? Even if yesterday's event was dramatic. Why does tomorrow, no matter how vividly imagined, never possesses quite the same quality as this moment? Most would answer it's because something special is occurring in the present. Maharaj says otherwise. Nothing special about the event. The striking of a clock, the sound of the bird, a passing thought, the taste of tea, any of these will do. The event itself carries nothing unique. What gives the present its stamp of reality is not the event. It is your presence. I am real, Maharaj says, for I am always now. It is one of the most extraordinary statements, and I am that. Have you ever thought for a second about how we see the world? Right? We see the world as though I'm Tim now, right? And I'm in this tunnel and I'm traveling down the tunnel and I'm basically going by all the things as I move through the tunnel. Right? That's how we look at the world, right? Stop for a second and realize that when Maharaj talks about the present always being there, he's flipped that on its head. What's really happened is that Tim is standing there and all the stuff is flowing through him. Do you see that? The action's not in you moving through things. The action is in things moving through you. You are always there. I was at my birthday party, 5, 15, 25, add however many years, right? What makes it the same is that everything moves through exactly the same thing, my presence. That's a wonderful way to look at it, right? So notice what flows naturally from it. The past has no independent existence. It survives only as a memory. Only the present is actually illuminated by presence itself. Yet almost all of our stories are built from memory and imagination. We remember, we anticipate, we compare, we project, we even change it. And then we wonder why life feels so distant. Things are how they are. The story insists they should become something else or that they should have been something else. Both movements leave the living present. The mind cannot remain here because here refuses to become permanent. The mind wants permanence, remember? The story attempts exactly that. It freezes the movement and converts flowing life into fixed meaning. This is why every story beneath its surface is really an argument. Think about that for a moment. Not simply an explanation, an argument. An argument that this version of events is finally the correct one, even when it's not. This is what happened. This is what it means. This is who I am. This is who you are. The verdict has been reached. Case closed. The neighbors in the farmer's story reach a verdict every 24 hours. The horse leaves, bad luck. The horse returns, good luck. The son breaks his leg, bad luck. The army passes by, good luck. Nothing actually changes except for the story. The farmer understands that the story is always incomplete. Things are how they are, the verdict can wait. Maharaj continues by asking whether pain is a fact of existence or something produced in the mind. His answer is astonishing. The universe is complete, complete, nothing lacking, nothing missing. If that is true, then where does the suffering arise? Not from life itself, from isolation. A part separated from the whole inevitably appears deficient. The moment an event is extracted from the seamless movement of life and examined by itself, it begins to look incomplete. And the reason it looks incomplete is because you've terminated it. You've made it final, right? That's the part that makes it feel incomplete. The mind says this should not have happened. This must continue. I have lost something. I finally have what I wanted. Each statement isolates one fragment from the river and asks it to explain the whole. It cannot, no fragment ever can. Things are how they are. The story says they are incomplete. Then Maharaj identifies the real source of our difficulty. The mind, by its very nature, divides and opposes. There it is. The opposition is trying to make things final, right? Permanent peace. You don't need permanent peace because I'm here to make it for you. That's what the mind wants you to think, right? So it separates, compares, judges, opposes, labels, this versus that, success versus failure, pleasure versus pain, me versus you, good fortune versus bad fortune. The dividing mind is not malicious, it's simply doing what it was designed to do. And when its conclusions are mistaken for reality itself, suffering appears. Then Maharaj asks the beautiful question, can there be another mind? Not another intellect. That's why don't get confused when he says mind. He's not looking for another intellect, not a better philosophy, another way of seeing, a mind that unites instead of divides, a mind that sees the whole in the part and the part in relation to the whole. Where is such a mind found? In going beyond the limiting, dividing, and opposing mind. Notice he does not say to destroy the ordinary mind. Right? Show me the ego and I will destroy it. Well, the reason he says that is because there's no ego to show. Ego is just you living as if you were an ego, right? You bought the story and you've lived it like it were real, as if. He says to go beyond it, the dividing mind continues, functioning beautifully in practical life. It balances checkbooks, builds bridges, repairs engines, prepares dinner. That's good. But is no longer to answer questions it cannot answer. Right? Have you ever noticed that human beings, we think there's no question that the mind should not be able to answer? It's no longer appointed the authority on reality. The stories remain available. They simply lose their claim to permanence. They become what they have always been, useful, temporary, as if, not truth. All right. So now now we've been real serious for a while, and let's have a little fun. At precisely this point, Nasruddin wanders into the conversation, a school teacher, hoping to broaden the horizons of her rather provincial students, assigned an essay on foreigners. The class worked diligently. Most of the papers reflected a growing appreciation of different cultures and traditions. Only Nasruddin's essay was troubling. It consisted of a single sentence. All foreigners are bastards. The teacher wisely resisted correcting him directly. Instead, she devoted the next several weeks to exploring the richness of the world's civilizations, Greek architecture, Roman law, Italian art, German music, Chinese philosophy, Indian spirituality, and African sculpture. The students listened with fascination. Finally, she assigned the essay again. This time she approached Nasruddin's paper with genuine hope. It read, all foreigners are bastards, some are cunning bastards. That is magnificent. Not because Nasruddin is prejudiced, he's honest. He exposes something every one of us does continuously. New information arrives, the story adjusts, just enough to preserve itself. The conclusion was never really open for examination, only modification. How often do we do exactly the same thing? We hear a new teacher teaching, we read another book, we attend satsang, the mind updates the story, while quietly protecting the storyteller.
Hmm.
The river continues flowing. The story keeps building dams. Things are how they are. The story insists on becoming how I say they are. That is why acceptance is so much deeper than tolerance. Tolerance still waits for the verdict. Acceptance declines to issue one. The farmer still plants his fields, still cares for his son, still works, still responds. Acceptance is not passivity, it's participation without a premature conclusion. And in this case, as long as life is moving, there's no need for a conclusion. Life continues unfolding. The story remains unfinished. Perhaps this is why Maharaj says the heart crosses the abyss, the mind creates. The mind divides, the heart includes. The mind concludes, the heart remains available. The mind freezes, the heart flows. The neighbors live from certainty, the farmer lives from presence. That is the real teaching. Not acceptance as an idea, acceptance as the natural expression of seeing that nothing has yet reached its final conclusion. Every event is still moving, every story remains unfinished, every interpretation is provisional, held lightly, released easily, useful when needed, gone when the river moves on. Things are how they are. Perhaps that simple sentence is not resignation after all. Perhaps it is freedom. Not because the story has finally been resolved, because the need to resolve has quietly come to an end. Then, almost unnoticed, something remarkable happens. The river is no longer something you're trying to control. It's simply where you discover you have always been flowing. All right. So that's just a noticing, right? So I remember when I was in India, because when I wrote this, I remember thinking to myself, we would go into groups, it might be primal, it could be, love and acceptance for all they had groups on all of this kind of thing. And then we would get done and we would go out into the area where we would all sit afterwards and talk to each other and everything. And what we would argue about was what we had explored that day, what was its final version, right? That was what we would argue about, right? So here we were every single day exposed to this beautiful flow of life. And the first thing after that, because it could be very confusing, as you can imagine, you're in a world where you're dealing with things and dealing with them in ways that aren't very comfortable. So the first thing that you do when you're done is you want to feel solidly on your feet again. And the way that we do that is we go and we say, here's what that means. And if somebody says that doesn't mean that, then what do? We argue with them, right? Say, not only is it that way, but I'm going to sit here and let my mind build a case because my mind is better than yours, right? So I'm going to build a
Right. Beat
case.
your mind up.
Yeah. So then you do that. So now the mind really feels important. Not only is it important enough to make you feel permanent, it's it's important enough to vanquish anybody who thinks that your permanence isn't the real permanence, right?
Yeah.
Think about politics, right? That's what yeah.
Oh man.
I read people say things about politics sometimes, and I'm like, wow, they're actually living inside that story, right? It's all made up, right? It's all made up. But and the thing I love about humans is we gather things, we take our facts and we basically assemble them, right? But we're really good at making sure that anything that doesn't match, well, that doesn't matter, right? Don't put that in there, right? So it's a little like when I was talking about how we hurdle through life as though we're hurdling and life is the stable thing that we're hurdling through rather than life being the changeable thing that's hurdling through us, right? Well, the minute you do that, you know, you're in essence saying there can be there are no conclusions. Right? The story that I tell about what it's like to be a seeker, the diving into the bottomless chasm, and the best you can do is you pass your fellow travelers who are also hurtling into a bottomless chasm and say, so far, so good. That's it, right? The rest is interpretation. So far, so good. I'm here. So far, so good. The rest is interpretation.
Oh,
Right? So watch your mind. I'll get ready. Just watch your mind as what happens in the watching when the watching collapses is the mind usually is reaching out to try to make something final. And that's part of identification. That's all that's happening. So nothing wrong with that. All you do is watch it and let it and let that dissolution start to push you back into the watching space. Right? Now I used to sit and listen to these things, and I would take these deep breaths like that, right? And I realized that it was because the conditioning was just so embedded that there was something to be achieved, that there was no other way that I could hear it. So even when they were saying, oh, just if somebody said, don't worry about it, just watch what is, I would be like, how do I achieve that watching what is, right? How got to get the pressure out because man, when you start seeing that, when you start seeing that what you're being told to do is to move into another thing that needs to be achieved, and now you're talking about stuff that's really hard to wrestle with, right? When you start talking about presence, I am, and that the story never is complete. I mean that now I've got to get what, right? I've got to get to that point. No, no, what you need's already there. Right. The watching that you are is already there. You just simply need to migrate to it. As it happens, you're just simply being migrated to your own watching. That's all that's happening. Right. So whenever you feel the to release that, watch and see if you haven't made something that really is very simple into something that the mind now is attempting to do. Go ahead, Brad. You had a comment.
oh, I was, sometimes I flip through my poetry before I show up, and I didn't flip through it this time. I just opened up the first one that popped into my face, and I'm just going to read half of it because the
Go
first
for it.
part, it
Go
goes,
for it, Brad. Brad's
as,
one of our resident poets, by the way.
yeah, and, yeah, pseudo philosopher. Um, as the freedom from the mere idea of being an individual is seen for what it is, just a habitual idea, it's like seeing that all reality is simply a habit of perception, too. It can be enjoyed for its appearance, but no longer does it contain any substance with any ability to guide or govern or dictate any aspect of our so-called lives. For the so-called life itself is only swirling appearances, wrapping and dancing around each other to the extent that we attribute a solidity to them that doesn't really exist other than the one substance that truly is. Rather like the stories we tell of our lives, so often spoken, we imbue them with qualities that never existed in the original occurrences, taking on so-called lives of their own. So I just thought that a different way of saying some of the stuff you said.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. Any way you get there, any way you get there is
Yeah,
absolutely
buddy.
right.
Yeah,
So, so the one thing I can say is that when you hear this, there's now nothing to do. In,
yeah.
in satsang, all that's going on is consciousness is speaking to consciousness. The work will be done for you in essence, right? It'll come to your mind when it needs to come to your mind. Whatever needs to happen will happen. When you lapse into that identified space from your watching space, great. Just get back on the horse and keep riding it, and then it'll happen. The minute that you think, oh, I should be watching this, you've already made that first step, right? Conscious is simply suggested to the mind, hey, go back to the watching. Right? You don't need to remember it. You don't need to have a list in there. All you need to do, Papaji was really famous. He used to say to all of his people, be quiet and come to satsang. The satsang was consciousness speaking to consciousness, and the quiet was simply absorbing what had happened within that. The work happens by itself. Right? So that's where a lot of the ease can happen when you're hearing something like I spoke of today, because I mean that's talking about acceptance and how there never is really a conclusion is really kind of a foreign thing if you think about it, right? I mean we just don't do life that way, right? And I spent my whole life as a businessman. Someone says, "What's the net profit?" I'm going, "It's still happening. I'll let you know when that's not an answer in business, right? No, nobody likes that, you know. Did you write that piece of code? Well, it never can really be written. It's just happening. That's not an answer, right? So, so think about everything that we do in life
Yeah.
typically seeks a point of finish or termination, right?
I'd
And
like to ask something if that's
yeah,
okay.
go ahead.
Now, this is totally within the, realizing that I'm, going from witness to the identified Brad guy and then to witness, and it goes back and forth. But even in the midst of being clearly in the witnessing place, I still wonder, what's the purpose of all this? I
Yeah,
mean, is
yeah.
there even a purpose? I mean, obviously, establishing the self as where you really who you really are and what it really is, you know, aspect of God, basically. But
So,
what purpose is
so,
accomplished or happens or whatever? Yeah,
so
what's the
I would
purpose?
like to tell that, and I know I've told you this before, but um, if you think about your body, if you think about your body mind, right?
Yeah,
So think about all of the things that are happening in the world at large, right? So the mind, I think it has like a million occurrences every nanosecond, something on that order, right? Well, if you take all of the humans in the world, what's that, 7 or 8 billion now? So
yeah,
take 8 billion and times it a million for every nanosecond. That would be all of the happenings that are basically occurring, in terms of the human body, right? So my question to you is, do you think Brad's intellect has the capability to sort through all of that?
never.
Well, if that's true, my question to you, what is meaning, right? But some picked out pieces that
Yeah,
yearning to represent something that can never happen.
yeah, to
So,
support a theory you already have.
right. So it's not that there is meaning or there isn't meaning. Meaning simply isn't available, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That's the truth of it. It's just not
yeah.
available. Yeah. So, and again, that really helped with tonight's. That's a really great question if you think about it, right? Because that allows the river to flow, right? Like, I guess I could say this is what's going on, but hey, I know that there are a billion, right? And that's so Ramesh would send you home and say, hey, look, take whatever it is you think you're most responsible for today,
Yeah.
and then think of all the factors that had to be there in order for that to be the case. And when you're done, what do you figure out? That what it is I thought I was responsible for is such a little itty bitty piece of all that happened. It can't be possible that I was in charge of that. That
Yeah.
what I thought was the thing that really I did. It can't be the case. And he would have you go home every night and spend 20 or 30 minutes, go through that exercise. Same thing as your question about. So in a way, the idea that meaning can happen, right, is the same enemy as thinking that a story has an ending, right? It just simply, I mean, unless, I always ask people that. I say, when you got up today, was the rest of the world there? Everybody says, yeah. Have you ever gotten up any day and the rest of it hasn't been there? No. Okay. Well, then I'm pretty sure that life will keep flowing until the body mind's gone. So I think we have that established, right? And if that's true, then even the ending of the body mind going away, right, ends up being kind of meaningless,
Yeah,
doesn't
we're
it?
bit players in an infinite series.
There you go. There you go. So, all right. Anything else? Any other comments anybody wants to make?
Oh man, it's
Alan,
good
I
to see
also
you,
have
Alan. Go
I
ahead.
also have a
Sorry.
question. Sorry.
Yeah.
I struggle a lot with this one. I can kind of get it in a big picture sense, but man, I feel a lot of resistance around this. Like what comes up for
Yeah.
me is, okay, great, the farmer, fuck that farmer. He doesn't do anything, like he doesn't have to, it's like you said, right, in the business world, or in any arena of life, you're trying to, you have to make decisions, you have to navigate, you have to discern. And I face so much frustration trying to d discern correctly, and so I am totally bought in on what you're saying, and I get angry that I wish it could be that simple, but I'm it's not for me, you know.
Yeah. So one thing to do is to start to create for yourself um, a story like when Brad talked about meaning, and I said, well, take a look at all that's going on. Could there really be meaning? Right? That's where you go with that. So I always remember that Ramesh, that people would ask him, they go, well, what's the difference between nature and nurture, right? Nature is what you come originally with, and nurture is the conditioning, you know? And Ramesh would always say, if you knew that answer, what would be different in your life? Right? And you go, oh, guess it doesn't really matter. So if you look at yourself and say, what I am is a biological computer that basically either by nature showing or by conditioning has been shaped in a certain particular way. And there's absolutely nothing that could stop what's happening in your life from happening in your life. And what creates the resistance is this idea that somehow you are making a decision. When you watch, you're going to see the body mind is already, it couldn't have done it any other way. So Ramesh would always say, and this is really helpful for me, by the way, there's a phrase they use in Hollywood in the old days. You remember they'd have those cameras that had the film on them, and they would roll, and they put those big things of film, and they would put it in the can, right? And Ramesh would say, life is already in the can. It's going to happen the way it's going to happen. And when you start to look at life that way, right? And it may take time, by the way, so don't worry about let the resistance be there as long as it is, right? But just start to see if the story isn't such that it's going to happen the way it's going to happen, right? So that's why I always talk about Maharaj. Somebody come in and ask a question, and he go, "That's the stupidest question I ever heard." He was a curmudgeon, you know. He was a feisty little dude, right? And so so you can always laugh because I'm going to guess that you're very familiar with both frustration and the anger that flows from that, right? Those are probably, yeah, that's how you're built. That's how this one's built too, right? This, we're in a world where, hey, we get we get to have frustration all the time and anger, but we do that because we think that we're actually doing something, when in fact, what's happening is that we're being performed, we're being lived. That's all. That's all that's going on. Yeah, that's the other one. Prasad used to always say that. All you are is a puppet with God's hand shoved up you. So we used to laugh when he would say that, right? But it gave you that same feeling, right? When you start to let that be the story, right? All of a sudden, all of this, this resistance that you feel, it starts to dissolve. You're like, oh, I get it. Right? It's going to happen the way that this one was stamped out to perform in a certain way. It's already in the can. It's going to happen this way. Okay, cool. Right. And then you feel now the what watching and witnessing is available. It's when you get frustrated and in resistance, you come in to occupy the space that's you. And that's when the blackout happens. Right. You go from witnessing into identified. Right. That's all that's happening there. Right. No worries about that. I'm always talking to Joseph about this one too, because he really loves the individual, and if I say to him, hey, the individual is just a story, he goes, no, 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 no. you know, and I go, Joseph, just let it be that way for a while and see how that goes, right? Let it be that way for a while. Right. So the one thing we all have in common, those of us that hang around, you, me, our style, Joseph, is that, there's an inbuilt resistance, right? It's the way we're built, all of us. Some of the rare ones, not so much, but for the most part, we all have that piece, right? And so that's always going to be the toughest part of this kind of little journey, if you will, right? It's funny, when I was with Osho, when I look back on that time, the one thing I can see was that what happened was almost a loosening up. I could never he was saying all of this stuff, the same stuff, and I flat didn't get it. I really didn't. I just didn't get it. It was several years there, right? And when I look back on it, it was just the softening up, right? It was the softening up, and then all of a sudden, the ability to go there made itself apparent. That became where the flow happened. Did you come on, Gian, to say something?
No, I just put my
Okay,
camera on. I was
cool.
cleaning my house.
But no
I'm
worries.
listening.
I was just very happy to see you emerge. I thought, oh, we're gonna get some more poets' wisdom.
Oh yeah. Oh
Gian
yeah.
is our other poet. All right, guys. Good questions, by the way. Thank you. I think that's really great. See you, Jaya. So anyway, so part of what we've talked about is trying to become a little bit more interactive in the satsang. I've tried at the end of things now to actually do a little bit more of that, and I think uh, the way it went today was really great. Brad was in here, really appreciated it. Sachit had some great questions. So I'm just going to continue to do that, and then, like I say, we may get to a place where we do just pure Q&A. We'll see how we feel about it. But right now, I think everybody's jumping, and it's really going well. All right, everybody.
Okay, Big Al.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
coming. Much love. And we'll
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
see everybody next week.
You
Sat
guys.
now.
What's up,
Yeah,
man?
buddy.